Imagine a bright, peaceful morning in a quiet town, birds chirping, neighbors smiling, and everything feeling just right. But within moments, that calm is ripped apart by an act so shocking it leaves an entire community reeling. A pregnant mother, full of hope and love, becomes the victim of a brutal attack by the very person sworn to protect her, a police officer. The clash of power, fear, and resilience ignites a chain of events that not only threatens to shatter her world, but also brings her husband's hidden skills into the spotlight. The question remains, how far would you go to protect the people you love? Before we dive into this intense and gripping story of love, justice, and redemption, comment below where you're watching from today. And if you're as captivated by this story as we are, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Havenwood, Arkansas was the kind of town where mornings felt like poetry in motion. The sunlight filtered gently through the trees, dappling the sidewalks in a golden hue. Neighbors exchanged cheerful greetings as they watered their gardens or walked their dogs. It was the kind of peaceful place where nothing bad should ever happen. Anna Carter loved mornings like this. She stepped out of her quaint brick home, her hand resting on her round belly, smiling at the warm glow of the day. At 6 months pregnant, she moved with a serene grace, her steps slow and careful. Today, her heart was light, and her mind was filled with thoughts of her husband, Ethan. Ethan had been away on a business trip for the past week, and Anna missed him dearly. She had spent the previous night preparing a list of his favorite dishes, imagining the joy on his face when he walked through the door that evening. "You're going to love what I'm making for Daddy," Anna said softly, rubbing her belly as she felt a gentle kick. Her laughter bubbled up, filling the quiet street. "I knew you'd agree, little one." As Anna strolled to the corner store, she waved to neighbors, who smiled and waved back. Everyone in Havenwood knew her as a kind and gentle soul, always ready to lend a helping hand. She relished these short walks, not just for the fresh air, but for the small interactions that made her feel connected to her community. But that peaceful morning took a sharp and unexpected turn. A loud screeching of tires shattered the calm as a police cruiser abruptly pulled up alongside Anna. Startled, she froze, clutching her shopping list tightly. The car's window rolled down, revealing Officer Kyle Henderson's stern face. Kyle was new to Havenwood, a recent transfer from another district. He quickly gained a reputation for his aggressive demeanor and lack of tact. His cold blue eyes narrowed as he barked, "Stop right there!" Anna blinked in confusion. "Excuse me, officer, is there a problem?" Kyle stepped out of the car, his imposing figure casting a long shadow on the pavement. "I need to see your ID," he demanded, his tone sharp and authoritative. Anna's hand instinctively moved to her belly, and her heart began to race. "I'm just on my way to the store," she said gently. "Why do you need to see my ID?" Kyle's face hardened. "Because I said so. You're acting suspicious." Anna felt a chill run down her spine. She had lived in Havenwood for years, walking these streets countless times without incident. This was different. His tone, his demeanor, and everything about the encounter felt wrong. "I don't understand," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I haven't done anything wrong." Kyle took a step closer, his presence looming. "Just hand over your ID," he snapped, his voice rising. "Now." Reluctantly, Anna fumbled through her purse and handed him her identification, her hands shaking. Her eyes darted around the street, hoping someone might intervene. A few people had stopped to watch, their faces filled with concern, but no one stepped forward. Kyle barely glanced at the ID before thrusting it back at her. "What are you really doing out here?" he asked, his tone accusatory. Anna's confusion turned to frustration. "I told you, I'm going to the store. Can I go now?" But Kyle wasn't done. He stepped even closer, his face mere inches from hers. "You think you can talk back to me?" he sneered. "You're hiding something, aren't you?" Anna took a step back, her hand instinctively shielding her belly. "Please, officer," she said, her voice quivering. "I just want to go to the store. I haven't done anything wrong." The tension exploded. Kyle's voice rose in a shout. "Stop resisting," he yelled, drawing the attention of more onlookers. "I'm not resisting," Anna cried, her voice breaking as she raised her hands in surrender. But Kyle's aggression escalated. In a flash, he lunged forward and shoved Anna, his actions rough and unprovoked. She stumbled, struggling to keep her balance. "Please, stop," she pleaded, tears streaming down her face. Kyle's response was unforgivable. With a swift motion, he kicked Anna in the stomach, sending her crashing to the ground. The world seemed to stop. Anna clutched her belly, a cry of agony escaping her lips. "My baby," she gasped, her voice barely audible over the ringing in her ears. Tears blurred her vision as she whispered, "Please, be okay." The crowd erupted in chaos. Onlookers rushed toward her, their voices a mix of horror and outrage. "Call an ambulance," someone shouted. A woman knelt beside Anna, gently cradling her head. "Stay with us, honey," she said, her voice trembling. "Help is on the way." Kyle stood frozen, his face unreadable. "Everyone back off," he barked, but no one listened. The sound of sirens filled the air as paramedics arrived, rushing to Anna's side. They worked quickly, stabilizing her and lifting her onto a stretcher. Anna's cries softened into whispers as she clung to consciousness. As the ambulance doors closed, taking Anna away, the bystanders turned their fury on Kyle. The officer's attempt to regain control was futile. The morning's peace was shattered, replaced by fear, anger, and a lingering question why. The ambulance sped through the streets of Havenwood, its sirens wailing as paramedics worked tirelessly to keep Anna stable. Inside, Anna clutched her belly, her whispered pleas barely audible. "Please, little one, hold on," she murmured, her tears blending with the sweat on her pale face. Every jolt of the vehicle felt like a lifetime of pain. At Havenwood General Hospital, the ER team was already waiting. As soon as the ambulance arrived, they sprang into action, wheeling Anna into a trauma room. Doctors barked orders, their faces tense, while nurses hurried to hook her up to monitors and IVs. "Placental abruption," one of the doctors said grimly. "We need an emergency C-section now." Anna's vision blurred as her mind raced with fear. Her body trembled, but her thoughts were solely on her baby. "Please," she whispered again, "just let my baby be okay." Meanwhile, back in Havenwood, the incident had already begun to ripple through the community. A bystander's video capturing the horrifying moment, Officer Kyle Henderson kicked Anna, had been uploaded online. Within hours, it spread like wildfire. In coffee shops, on social media, and at workspaces, everyone in Havenwood seemed to be talking about the video. Hashtags like Justice for Anna and Stop Police Violence began trending, drawing attention not just locally, but nationwide. At the town square, a group of residents had already begun gathering, holding signs and demanding answers. Among them was Mrs. Conway, an elderly woman who had witnessed the event. "I saw it with my own eyes," she told reporters, her voice shaking. "That officer kicked her like she was nothing. She's a pregnant woman. She didn't deserve that." Anger boiled over in the comments online. "How could this happen in our town? Kyle Henderson needs to be fired immediately. This isn't just about Anna. This is about every abuse of power." The police department released a short, tone-deaf statement, claiming that they were looking into the matter and urging the public to remain calm. But it only fueled the outrage. At the hospital, Anna's best friend Sarah arrived in a rush, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and fury. She had seen the video on her phone and immediately dropped everything to be by Anna's side. "Where is she?" Sarah demanded at the front desk. The nurse gestured toward the surgical waiting room. "She's in surgery now. It was an emergency." Sarah's legs felt weak, but she forced herself to move forward. She found a seat and buried her face in her hands, tears streaming down her cheeks. "How could this happen?" she whispered to herself. Moments later, a doctor appeared, his scrubs stained with blood. Sarah shot up from her chair. "How is she?" she asked, her voice trembling. "She's stable for now," the doctor replied. "We've managed to deliver the baby, but he's very premature and will need to stay in the NICU. Anna is still in critical condition, but she's a fighter." Sarah exhaled a shaky breath, a mix of relief and lingering worry. "Can I see her?" "Not yet," the doctor said gently. "But as soon as she's out of recovery, we'll let you know." Sarah nodded, sinking back into the chair. She pulled out her phone and opened the video again, her anger rekindling as she watched the horrifying scene unfold. She vowed then and there that she wouldn't rest until Anna received justice. In the surgical recovery room, Anna lay unconscious, her face pale against the hospital pillow. Machines beeped softly around her, monitoring her every vital sign. Her tiny baby boy, no larger than a loaf of bread, was in the NICU, hooked up to tubes and wires that seemed impossibly small. Sarah stood by the window, staring out at the parking lot below. Her thoughts raced. She wished Ethan were there. He was always so composed, so dependable. If anyone could make sense of this chaos, it was him. But Ethan was still miles away, completely unaware of the nightmare unfolding back home. Across town, Officer Kyle Henderson sat in his small, dimly lit office at the police station, trying to drown out the chaos around him. His phone buzzed incessantly with notifications, each one carrying another wave of fury from the public. He scrolled through the comments on the video, his face growing paler with each passing moment. "Fire Kyle Henderson. We demand justice. This man should never wear a badge again." Kyle tried to brush it off, convincing himself it was all just noise. But deep down, unease began to creep in. He wasn't prepared for the level of attention this incident was getting. A knock at the door startled him. It was one of his colleagues, Officer Ryan, who looked uncomfortable as he stepped inside. "Kyle," Ryan said hesitantly, "you should know there's a meeting happening right now. The chief's not happy. They're talking about you." Kyle's jaw tightened. "Let them talk," he muttered, trying to sound unaffected. But the truth was, his confidence was beginning to crack. As Ryan left, Kyle leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. He had always seen himself as untouchable, a man who could wield his authority however he pleased. But now, for the first time, he felt the ground beneath him starting to shift. By evening, Anna's story had made headlines on national news outlets. Videos of the incident played on repeat, accompanied by outraged commentary from anchors and legal experts. "This is yet another example of unchecked police brutality," one anchor declared. "And this time, the victim is a pregnant woman who did nothing wrong." Social media erupted with calls for protests, not just in Havenwood, but in nearby towns and cities. People from all walks of life voiced their support for Anna, demanding accountability and systemic change. At the same time, Sarah received a call from Ethan. "I'm on my way," Ethan said, his voice calm but laced with urgency. "Tell me everything." Sarah's voice broke as she recounted the events. "Ethan, it was horrible. She didn't do anything, and he just attacked her. You need to get here as soon as you can." "I'll be there," Ethan said firmly. "And don't worry, Sarah. He won't get away with this." As the call ended, Sarah felt a flicker of hope. Ethan Carter wasn't an ordinary man, and if anyone could turn the tides, it was him. The sterile white walls of Havenwood General Hospital buzzed with urgency. Nurses and doctors moved in a blur, their focus razor-sharp as they fought to save Anna Carter and her newborn son. In the operating room, the air was thick with tension. "She's losing too much blood," one doctor said, his voice steady but grim. "We need to move quickly." The team worked with precision, stitching, and repair as best they could. The baby was delivered but in a fragile state, his tiny cries barely audible as he was whisked away to the neonatal intensive care unit, NICU. For Anna, the battle wasn't over. In the waiting room, Sarah paced anxiously. Each minute felt like an hour as she imagined the worst. She had always seen Anna as the strongest person she knew, someone who exuded kindness and resilience. But now, seeing her friend so vulnerable, Sarah felt helpless. When a nurse finally emerged, Sarah rushed to her, her heart pounding. "Is she okay?" she asked breathlessly. "She's stable for now," the nurse replied, her expression cautious. "But the next 24 hours are critical." Sarah clutched her chest, relief mixing with lingering fear. "And the baby?" "He's in the NICU," the nurse said gently. "He's very small but alive. The doctors are doing everything they can." Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes as she whispered a silent prayer. "Thank you," she said, her voice shaking. Bookmark. Hours later, Anna stirred in her hospital bed, her eyelids fluttering open. The fluorescent lights above her felt harsh, and the beeping of machines was a stark reminder of where she was. She tried to move, but the pain in her abdomen stopped her. "Anna?" A familiar voice called softly. Turning her head slightly, Anna saw Sarah sitting beside her, holding her hand. The sight of her friend brought a weak smile to her lips. "Sarah," Anna whispered, her voice hoarse. "The baby? Is he okay?" Sarah leaned closer, her grip tightening. "He's in the NICU, but he's holding on. Just like you. You're both fighters." Tears slipped down Anna's cheeks as she whispered, "I was so scared. I thought I'd lose him." "You didn't," Sarah reassured her, her own eyes glistening. "And you're not alone, Anna. Ethan's on his way. He'll be here soon." Hearing Ethan's name brought a flicker of strength to Anna's eyes. She nodded weakly, her hand resting protectively on her stomach, even though she knew her baby wasn't there. Thousands of miles away, Ethan Carter sat on a plane, his jaw clenched as he stared out the window. The call from Sarah had turned his world upside down. As a seasoned CIA operative, Ethan was no stranger to crisis. He had faced terrorists, war zones, and high-stakes negotiations. But this was different. This was personal. The video of Kyle Henderson's attack on Anna played on a loop in Ethan's mind. Every time he saw the moment Anna fell, clutching her belly in pain, his blood boiled. "She didn't deserve this," he muttered to himself, his fists tightening. When the plane landed, Ethan didn't waste a second. He pushed through the crowded terminal, his focus singular. As soon as he exited the airport, he jumped into a waiting car and sped toward Havenwood General. The hospital was quiet when Ethan arrived, the stillness of the night contrasting sharply with the chaos in his heart. Sarah was the first to see him, rushing toward him with tear-streaked cheeks. "Ethan," she called, relief washing over her. He embraced her briefly, his face a mask of calm intensity. "Where is she?" he asked, his voice low but urgent. Sarah led him to Anna's room, her heart aching as she watched Ethan prepare himself. She had always admired his composure, but she could see the cracks in his facade. When Ethan stepped into the room, his breath caught in his throat. Anna lay in the hospital bed, her face pale, her body fragile. Yet when she saw him, her eyes lit up with a mixture of love and relief. "Ethan," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. He crossed the room in seconds, gently taking her hand in his. "I'm here, Anna," he said softly, his voice breaking for the first time. "I'm so sorry I wasn't here sooner." Anna shook her head weakly. "You're here now," she murmured. "That's all that matters." Ethan kissed her hand, his eyes burning with unshed tears. But as he held her, a storm brewed within him. He had seen injustice before, but never like this, never so close to home. Later that night, as Anna slept, Ethan sat in the corner of the room, his mind racing. Sarah approached him cautiously, sensing the fire behind his calm exterior. "Ethan," she said softly, "you need to see this." She handed him her phone, where the video of Kyle's attack was paused at the worst moment when Anna hit the ground. Ethan's jaw tightened as he pressed play, watching the scene unfold. "The whole town is talking about this," Sarah said. "The police department is trying to sweep it under the rug, but people aren't letting it go." Ethan nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving the screen. "They won't get away with it," he said, his voice cold and steady. "Kyle Henderson will pay for what he did." Sarah hesitated. "Ethan, what are you planning?" Ethan looked up at her, his expression unreadable. "Whatever it takes," he said simply. As the night wore on, Ethan left Anna's room briefly to make a phone call. Standing in a quiet hallway, he dialed a number he hadn't used in years. "Code Black," he said when the line connected. There was a pause on the other end. Then a voice replied, "Understood. What do you need?" Ethan's lips curved into a grim smile. "Everything you have on Officer Kyle Henderson. I want his entire record, every mistake, every complaint, every secret he's tried to bury." The voice responded quickly, "You'll have it within the hour." Ethan hung up, slipping the phone back into his pocket. He leaned against the wall, his eyes dark with determination. He had spent years operating in the shadows, gathering intelligence and dismantling threats. Now he would use those skills to protect his family. When Ethan returned to Anna's room, she stirred awake. Her eyes searched his face, sensing the weight he carried. "Ethan," she said softly, "promise me you won't do anything reckless." He smiled faintly, sitting beside her and brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I promise to do what's right," he said, his voice calm but firm. Anna closed her eyes, too exhausted to argue. As she drifted back to sleep, Ethan's resolve hardened. No one harmed his family, and he walked away unscathed. The first rays of dawn crept through the windows of Havenwood General Hospital, but Ethan Carter wasn't thinking about the sunrise. He sat at a corner table in the hospital cafe, his laptop open, fingers flying over the keyboard. Each keystroke felt like a strike against the man who had shattered his family's peace. Kyle Henderson had made a grave mistake, and Ethan was about to make him realize just how big it was. Bookmark. Go back. With access to high-level intelligence networks, Ethan wasn't just searching for Kyle's name in the public record. he was digging deeper. He tapped into databases that most people didn't even know existed, pulling up Kyle's personnel files, complaint reports, and disciplinary actions that had been conveniently buried. Kyle Henderson's record was worse than Ethan had imagined. Years of complaints about excessive force, misconduct, and racial profiling were documented but had somehow disappeared from his official file. Ethan wasn't surprised. Men like Kyle often relied on the system's silence to protect them. But Ethan had no intention of being silent. He smirked grimly as he compiled the damning evidence. Ethan gathered emails, reports, and even a photograph from a prior altercation. By the time he finished, he had a detailed dossier that painted a vivid picture of Kyle's unchecked abuse of power. That morning, Kyle awoke to find a package on his doorstep. At first, he assumed it was ordinary mail, but when he opened it, his stomach dropped. Inside was a thick envelope filled with printed records of his past transgressions, evidence he thought had been erased. On top was a handwritten note in bold black letters. "We know who you are. Make it right." Kyle's hands shook as he rifled through the documents. Each page was worse than the last. Complaints from victims, internal memos questioning his conduct, and even a photo of him in a compromising position during a night out he thought no one had witnessed. He glanced around his living room, paranoid that someone might be watching him even now. "Who the hell is doing this?" he muttered under his breath. Kyle tried to go about his day as usual, but his nerves were frayed. When he got into his car to leave for the station, the engine refused to start. He cursed under his breath and popped the hood, only to find the spark plugs had been tampered with. Later, at the station, his phone began acting strangely. It glitched and restarted on its own as though someone had hacked it. Messages popped up on the screen seemingly from nowhere, with phrases like, "Tick-tock, Kyle. Time is running out." He slammed the phone down on his desk, sweat beading on his forehead. His colleagues noticed his unease. One of them, Officer Ryan, approached cautiously. "You okay, Kyle?" Ryan asked, his tone hesitant. Kyle snapped, "I'm fine." But Ryan wasn't convinced. Neither were the other officers, who exchanged whispers and knowing glances as Kyle stormed out of the room. Ethan observed everything from the shadows, and his actions were meticulously calculated to unravel Kyle's confidence. The former CIA operative understood one universal truth. Fear was the most effective weapon. Kyle had spent years instilling fear in others, and now Ethan was turning the tables. That night, Ethan sent Kyle one final message. This time it wasn't through a hacked phone or a mysterious package. It was a live video feed sent to Kyle's laptop, showing his own living room from an angle he couldn't identify. Kyle's heart raced as he stared at the screen. "How the hell?" he started, but his words died in his throat. The camera panned slowly, capturing every corner of the room before zooming in on a single object, a note placed on his coffee table. Kyle bolted from his desk to the living room, his breathing ragged. The note was there, just as it had appeared in the video. He picked it up with trembling hands. The words were simple, but they struck like a thunderclap. "This is your last chance. Resign or face the consequences." Kyle sank onto the couch, his mind spinning. He had always thought himself untouchable, protected by his badge and the system that upheld him. But now, he felt exposed in a way he never had before. At the hospital, Ethan returned to Anna's room, his expression calm but unreadable. She was awake, her strength slowly returning, though her movements were still careful. "Ethan," she said softly, "what's going on? You seem distant." He sat beside her, taking her hand in his. "I've just been making sure everything is taken care of," he said gently. Anna's eyes searched his face, sensing there was more he wasn't saying, but she was too tired to push further. "You'll tell me if there's anything I need to know, right?" she asked. Ethan smiled faintly. "Always," he said. But deep down, he knew there were things Anna would never need to know. She didn't need to carry the weight of what he had done or what he was prepared to do. Back at his home, Kyle sat in the dark, his mind racing. Every attempt to contact his superiors had been met with indifference. The police chief had given him a half-hearted lecture about optics and warned him to keep a low profile. It was clear Kyle was being hung out to dry. The messages, the packages, the video, and whoever was behind this weren't going to stop. And Kyle knew, deep down, that he deserved it. By the end of the night, he made a decision. He couldn't fight this. The fear was too great, the pressure too overwhelming. He poured himself a drink, his hands still trembling, and began drafting his resignation letter. In the dim light of his makeshift office at the hospital, Ethan received the confirmation he had been waiting for. Kyle's resignation had been submitted to the department. He leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. The battle wasn't over yet. There were still legal hurdles and public accountability to consider, but this was a step in the right direction. Ethan glanced at a photo of Anna on his phone, her smile radiant even through the haze of pain. For her and their child, he would do whatever it took. The morning sun filtered through the blinds of the police department conference room, casting long shadows on the floor. Officers shuffled into the room, their chatter subdued. At the center of it all, Kyle Henderson sat rigidly in his chair, his resignation letter neatly folded in front of him. His usual air of authority had been replaced by a pale, hollow look that hinted at sleepless nights and mounting paranoia. Whispers rippled through the room as the officers exchanged glances, none of them offering him a word of support. Once a man who carried himself with arrogance, Kyle now seemed smaller, as if the weight of his actions and their consequences had finally crushed him. "Officer Henderson," the police chief began, his voice stern. "We've received your letter of resignation. Before we proceed, do you have anything to say for yourself?" Kyle swallowed hard, his throat dry. For a moment, he considered fighting back, justifying his actions. But he knew it would be futile. The evidence was overwhelming, the public outrage deafening. He could almost hear the roar of the crowd gathering outside the station, their signs and chants demanding justice. Kyle's voice cracked. He cleared his throat, avoiding the stares of his colleagues. "I made a mistake, a terrible mistake." The chief's expression didn't soften. "That much is clear. You've not only brought shame to this department, but endangered the trust our community places in us. You've left us no choice but to accept your resignation, effective immediately." Kyle nodded numbly, rising from his chair. As he walked out of the conference room, the silence was deafening. Bookmark. Outside the station, a crowd had gathered, their signs held high. "Justice for Anna," they chanted in unison. No more police brutality. The video of Kyle's attack on Anna had now reached national news outlets, sparking debates about systemic racism and police accountability. Havenwood, once a quiet town, had become the epicenter of a larger movement. Reporters with cameras flocked to the streets, capturing the growing protests and interviewing residents. One of the bystanders who had filmed the incident, a young man named Marcus, addressed a crowd of reporters. "I saw the whole thing," he said, his voice trembling with anger. "Anna wasn't doing anything wrong. She was just walking to the store, and that man, that officer, attacked her like she didn't matter. But she does matter. We're not letting this go." Social media erupted with calls for deeper investigations, not just into Kyle, but the department itself. Under the pressure of public scrutiny, the Havenwood Police Department announced that an internal review would be conducted. At the hospital, Anna sat propped up in bed, her strength slowly returning. The news coverage played on the small TV mounted on the wall. Sarah sat beside her, scrolling through her phone, reading aloud the messages of support flooding in from strangers. "Listen to this one," Sarah said with a smile. "Anna, you're so strong. We're praying for you and your baby." Anna smiled weakly, her hand resting protectively on her belly. Her son was still in the NICU, fighting for his life, but each update from the doctors brought a little more hope. "It's overwhelming," Anna said softly. "All these people standing up for me." Sarah nodded. "You've inspired them, Anna. What happened to Yo and what Kyle did is bigger than just you now. It's about making sure this doesn't happen to anyone else." Anna's eyes filled with tears, but she quickly wiped them away. "I just want my son to grow up in a world where he's safe," she said. "Where he doesn't have to be afraid of the people who are supposed to protect him." Sarah reached out and squeezed her hand. "That's what all of this is for." The next day, the atmosphere in Havenwood was electric with anticipation. Kyle Henderson had announced he would hold a press conference outside the police station, and the entire town seemed to have turned out to watch. Reporters lined the barricades, their cameras trained on the podium set up on the steps. Protesters stood nearby, their signs held high. When Kyle finally stepped outside, the crowd fell into a tense silence. He looked nothing like the man who had terrorized Anna on that fateful morning. His uniform was gone, replaced by a simple suit that hung awkwardly on his frame. His face was pale, his hands trembling as he adjusted the microphone. "I want to start by addressing the incident involving Mrs. Anna Carter," Kyle began, his voice shaky. "What I did was wrong. It was an abuse of power, and I deeply regret my actions." Murmurs spread through the crowd. Some were shocked to hear him admit his guilt. Others remained skeptical, suspecting it was a forced apology. "I take full responsibility for my behavior," Kyle continued, "and effective immediately, I am resigning from the Havenwood Police Department." The crowd erupted into a mix of cheers and jeers. Reporters scrambled to capture the moment, their questions flying fast and furious as Kyle stepped away from the podium and disappeared inside the station. From her hospital bed, Anna watched the press conference on TV. Her fingers tightened around Ethan's hand as they listened to Kyle's words. "He admitted it," Anna whispered, disbelief in her voice. Ethan nodded, his expression calm but intense. "He had no choice," he said simply. Anna turned to look at him, her brow furrowing. "Ethan, what did you do?" Ethan met her gaze, his eyes steady. "I made sure he understood the consequences of his actions," he said. Anna didn't press further. She had long suspected that Ethan's work wasn't as straightforward as he often made it seem, but right now she was too tired to unravel that mystery. "Thank you," she said softly, leaning against him. Ethan kissed her forehead, his resolve unshaken. "No one will ever hurt you or our family again," he promised. The resignation of Kyle Henderson marked a turning point for Havenwood. The internal review of the police department uncovered several other instances of misconduct, leading to suspensions and policy changes. The community continued to demand accountability, but for Anna and her family, the most immediate battle had been won. Kyle's life, once defined by unchecked authority, was now in shambles. His name was disgraced, his career over. The whispers about him grew louder, rumors swirling about how someone had uncovered his darkest secrets. But Kyle knew the truth. Whoever was behind his downfall was far more powerful and meticulous than he could ever comprehend. And Ethan Carter, sitting quietly by his wife's side, had no intention of revealing just how far he had gone to protect his family. The sun was setting over Havenwood when Ethan returned to the hospital after handling the final threads of his plan. Inside Anna's room, the soft hum of machines was accompanied by the occasional coo of their newborn son from his NICU crib. The baby, still fragile but fighting, had been allowed a short visit with his mother under careful supervision. Anna held him gently, her smile weary but full of love. Her strength was returning day by day, and the sight of her son, his tiny fingers clutching hers, gave her more hope than she thought possible. Ethan paused at the doorway, taking in the scene. This moment was what he had fought for. He stepped inside, his movements slow, as if not to disturb the peace that had finally settled over them. "Look who's getting stronger," Ethan said softly, pulling a chair beside Anna. Anna smiled up at him. "He's a fighter, just like his dad," she replied. "And his mom," Ethan added, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Outside the hospital walls, Havenwood was undergoing its own transformation. What had started as outrage over Anna's assault had grown into a broader conversation about change. The local government announced plans for increased police accountability, including a civilian oversight board and mandatory body cameras for officers. Neighbors who had once kept to themselves now reached out to one another, offering support and solidarity. Vigils were held in Anna's honor, the flickering candles lighting up the streets as voices rose in unity. Sarah, ever the loyal friend, had become a key figure in organizing these efforts. At one gathering, she stood before a crowd, her voice steady but impassioned. "We're here because Anna's story reminds us that change doesn't come from silence," Sarah said, her words met with cheers. "We must continue to fight, not just for her, but for every victim of injustice." Meanwhile, Kyle Henderson's life was unraveling faster than he could keep up. His resignation didn't end the scrutiny. Instead, it amplified it. Local and national reporters dug into his past, uncovering more instances of misconduct. Kyle had gone into hiding, his home a fortress of drawn curtains and unanswered doorbells. The messages left on his voicemail were relentless. Some from former colleagues trying to distance themselves, others from strangers expressing their anger. One night, Kyle sat in his darkened living room, staring at a blank TV screen. The shadows in the room felt oppressive, and every sound outside made him flinch. He had always been the one in control, the one people feared. Now he was the hunted, and he didn't know how to fight back. The memory of the live video feed, its eerie precision, haunted him most of all. Who had done this? How had they known so much about him? As the days passed, Kyle's paranoia only deepened. He deleted his social media accounts, stopped answering calls, and avoided public places. His life, once defined by power and confidence, had been reduced to isolation and fear. Back at the hospital, Anna's recovery continued steadily. But the questions lingering in her mind grew stronger. She knew Ethan had played a role in Kyle's sudden resignation and public apology. He was too calm, too composed for it to be a coincidence. One afternoon, as they sat together in the quiet room, Anna finally broke the silence. "Ethan," she began, her voice soft but probing, "I need you to be honest with me. What did you do to make Kyle step down?" Ethan leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. He took a deep breath before answering. "I did what needed to be done," he said simply. "That's not an answer," Anna pressed, her brow furrowing. Ethan reached for her hand, his touch gentle but firm. "Anna, you've been through enough," he said. "You don't need to carry the weight of what happened with him. Just know that he won't hurt anyone else again." Anna searched his face, trying to read between the lines. She had long suspected that Ethan's work wasn't just business. There were moments, unanswered phone calls, trips he couldn't explain, and a certain sharpness in his demeanor that hinted at something more. "Someday," she said quietly, "I hope you'll tell me everything." Ethan smiled faintly, brushing a kiss across her knuckles. "Someday," he replied, though he knew some secrets were best left buried. The day Anna was finally discharged from the hospital felt like the first breath of freedom after weeks of suffocating tension. Ethan wheeled her to the hospital entrance, where Sarah was waiting with balloons and a stuffed animal for the baby. "Welcome home, Mama," Sarah said, her grin wide. Anna laughed, tears glistening in her eyes. "Thank you, Sarah, for everything." The drive back to their house was quiet, the kind of silence filled with unspoken gratitude. When they pulled into the driveway, Anna gasped softly. Their neighbors had decorated the front porch with a banner that read, "Welcome home, baby Carter." Ethan helped Anna out of the car and carried their son in his carrier. As they stepped inside, Anna felt an overwhelming sense of relief. The nightmare was over, and while there were still wounds to heal, physical and emotional, she knew they had made it through the worst. That night, after putting the baby down to sleep, Ethan sat alone in his office. The room was dimly lit, the soft glow of his computer screen casting shadows on the walls. He opened a drawer and pulled out a small metal box, its surface scuffed and worn. Inside were fragments of his past, badges, encrypted drives, and photographs from missions long completed. Among them was a single, unassuming envelope. Ethan slid it open and reviewed the contents, a final dossier on Kyle Henderson. The job was done. Kyle's career and reputation were beyond repair, and the information Ethan had gathered ensured that any attempt to rebuild his life would be met with failure. Ethan closed the box and locked it away, his mind settling into a quiet resolve. He hadn't just protected his family, he had sent a message to anyone who might ever try to harm them again. As Ethan joined Anna in their bedroom, she stirred awake, her eyes meeting his. "Everything okay?" she asked sleepily. "Everything's fine," Ethan replied, his voice steady. He climbed into bed, his hand resting on hers. "No one will ever hurt us again," he said softly. Anna smiled faintly, her eyes closing as she drifted back to sleep. Ethan lay awake for a while, staring at the ceiling. The world outside might still be chaotic and unjust, but in this moment, with his family safe, he felt at peace. Havenwood buzzed with anticipation as news spread of a public town meeting organized by the Havenwood Police Department. For weeks, the town had been gripped by anger, fueled by protests and the relentless demand for answers. Now, they would finally hear the official response to the actions of Kyle Henderson and the steps being taken to ensure accountability. The town hall was packed that evening. Residents of all ages filled the rows of folding chairs, their faces a mix of determination and skepticism. Reporters lined the walls, cameras poised to capture every word, while police officers stood by with stiff expressions, unsure of what the night would bring. At precisely 7 p.m., Police Chief Ronald Greer stepped onto the small stage. His face was grave, his usual air of authority tempered by the weight of the scandal that had rocked Havenwood. He adjusted the microphone, the feedback squealing briefly before his voice echoed through the room. "Good evening," he began, scanning the audience. "I stand before you tonight as the leader of a department that has failed this community." A murmur rippled through the crowd. The chief continued, his tone steady but apologetic. The actions of former Officer Kyle Henderson were inexcusable. His behavior betrayed the oath every officer takes to serve and protect. On behalf of the Havenwood Police Department, I extend my deepest apologies to Mrs. Anna Carter, her family, and to all of you. The crowd remained quiet, their attention unwavering. As of today, the chief added, Officer Henderson has been formally charged with assault, pending trial. We are cooperating fully with an independent investigation into his actions and the systemic issues that allowed this to happen. The room erupted in applause, mixed with cheers of relief and shouts of, "It's about time!" Anna sat in the front row, her presence a symbol of resilience. Ethan sat beside her, his hand resting protectively on her knee, while Sarah sat on her other side, a reassuring presence. Though Anna still carried the physical scars of the attack, her spirit had grown stronger. As the meeting continued, the floor was open for questions and comments. Residents lined up to speak, their voices filled with frustration, anger, and hope for change. Finally, it was Anna's turn. With Ethan's help, she stood and walked to the microphone, her movements slow but deliberate. The room fell silent as she adjusted the mic, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "My name is Anna Carter," she began. "I'm a mother, a wife, and a proud member of this community." She paused, taking a breath before continuing. "What happened to me should never have happened. Not to me, not to anyone. But I'm here today, standing in front of you, because I refuse to let fear define me. I refuse to let injustice win." Her words hung in the air, resonating deeply. "I want to thank everyone who stood by me, who shared my story, who demanded justice. This isn't just about me. It's about making sure this community is safe for everyone, no matter who they are or what they look like." As Anna stepped away from the microphone, the crowd rose to their feet in applause. Her courage, her voice, had become a rallying cry for change. The days following the town meeting were filled with cautious optimism. Kyle Henderson's formal charges meant he would face a trial, and the town braced for what would undoubtedly be a high-profile case. National media descended on Havenwood, eager to cover every development. Pundits debated the implications, legal analysts dissected the charges, and activists from across the country reached out to support Anna and her family. Ethan watched the spectacle unfold with quiet detachment. While others focused on the headlines, he focused on ensuring that Kyle's trial would be airtight. He had already provided the prosecuting attorneys with the extensive dossier he had compiled, ensuring no detail was overlooked. For Kyle Henderson, the trial was not just a legal battle. It was the dismantling of everything he had built his life upon. His face was plastered on TV screens and news articles, labeled as a symbol of abusive power. Former colleagues distanced themselves, many claiming they had seen his behavior coming, but had been too afraid to speak up. The trial date was set, and Kyle's once confident demeanor had crumbled entirely. Each passing day brought new revelations about his past misconduct, ensuring that even if he escaped legal punishment, his reputation was irreparably damaged. Kyle's attorney made several desperate attempts to negotiate a plea deal, but the public outcry was too great. "He needs to face the full consequences," one prosecutor stated firmly. Anything less would be an insult to the victims. Havenwood, once divided by indifference and complacency, had grown closer in the wake of the tragedy. The town's newfound unity was evident in the everyday interactions between its residents. Strangers exchanged smiles on the street, neighbors shared meals, and people who had never been involved in civic matters now attended town meetings regularly. The local high school held a community art project, inviting students to create murals that celebrated resilience and justice. One mural depicted a mother holding her baby, her expression both protective and hopeful. Beneath it were the words, "Strength in love, justice in action." At home, Anna and Ethan began settling into their new normal. Their baby boy, now stronger and healthier, brought light and laughter back into their lives. Though the wounds from Kyle's attack would take time to heal completely, Anna found solace in the love surrounding her. Ethan, ever vigilant, kept a watchful eye on his family. His CIA training had taught him to anticipate threats, but now his focus was on creating a life where Anna and their son could thrive without fear. One evening, as they sat together in the nursery, Anna cradling their baby, she looked up at Ethan. "Do you think things will really change?" she asked. Ethan nodded, his expression firm. "Change takes time, but it starts with people like you, people brave enough to stand up and demand it." Anna smiled, her heart swelling with gratitude. She leaned her head against Ethan's shoulder, her baby nestled between them. "We're going to be okay," she said softly, and for the first time in weeks, she truly believed it. The warm glow of the evening sun poured through the windows of the Carter household, casting long shadows across the living room. Anna sat on the couch, cradling her baby boy in her arms. He was asleep, his tiny chest rising and falling with each soft breath. The past few weeks had been a whirlwind of emotions, but in this moment, with her child safe and healthy, Anna felt a profound sense of peace. Ethan walked into the room, carrying 2 mugs of tea. He set them down on the coffee table and sat beside Anna, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. She leaned into him, their son nestled securely between them. "Look at him," Anna whispered, her voice full of wonder. "After everything he's here. He's strong." Ethan smiled, brushing a gentle hand over the baby's head. "Just like his mom," he said. The next few days were filled with small, quiet victories. Anna's strength continued to return, and she was able to take short walks outside with Ethan by her side. Neighbors stopped by to offer their support, bringing meals, gifts, and kind words. One evening, Sarah arrived with a basket full of baby supplies and a cake decorated with the words, "Welcome home, baby Carter." "I couldn't resist," Sarah said with a laugh as she set the basket on the counter. "Besides, every celebration needs cake." As the small group sat around the table, enjoying the impromptu gathering, Anna looked around the room and felt a surge of gratitude. These were the people who had stood by her when she needed them most. "Thank you," Anna said, her voice steady but full of emotion. "Not just for this, but for everything. I couldn't have done this without all of you." Sarah reached across the table, squeezing Anna's hand. "We're a team," she said with a grin, "always." Late one night, after Anna and the baby had gone to bed, Ethan sat alone in his office. The room was dimly lit, the only sound the faint ticking of a clock on the wall. He opened the drawer where he kept the small metal box, pulling it out and placing it on the desk. Inside were the tools of a life. Anna only knew fragments of a CIA badge, encrypted devices, and documents from past missions. Ethan stared at the contents for a long moment before closing the box again and locking it away. His work was never far behind him, but this time, he had no regrets about using his skills to protect his family. He leaned back in his chair, his gaze shifting to a framed photo of Anna and the baby on the desk. They were smiling, the sunlight catching Anna's hair in a way that made her seem to glow. "I'll protect you," he murmured quietly. "Always." As the days turned into weeks, life in the Carter household began to find a rhythm. The baby grew stronger each day, his laughter filling the house with joy. Anna started journaling her experiences, hoping to one day share her story with her son. One afternoon, as she wrote by the window, Ethan entered the room holding a small box tied with a ribbon. "What's this?" Anna asked, looking up with a curious smile. "Open it and see," Ethan replied, sitting beside her. Inside was a necklace with a delicate charm shaped like a heart, engraved with the initials AC and BC. "Anna Carter and Baby Carter," Ethan explained. "A reminder of how strong you both are." Tears welled in Anna's eyes as she fastened the necklace around her neck. "Thank you," she whispered, leaning in to kiss him. The impact of Anna's story extended far beyond their small town. Inspired by her courage, activists and organizations began pushing for broader reforms, and Havenwood became a symbol of resilience and accountability. Anna was invited to speak at events, sharing her journey with others who had faced similar struggles. Though nervous at first, She found strength in the knowledge that her words could inspire others to stand up for themselves. One day, as she prepared for a local event, Ethan watched her from the doorway, pride evident in his eyes. "You're incredible. You know that?" he said. Anna laughed, adjusting her blouse. "I'm just trying to make a difference." "You already have," Ethan replied, stepping forward to kiss her cheek. That evening, after the baby had been put to bed, Anna and Ethan sat together on the porch swing, the cool night air wrapping around them like a comforting embrace. The stars above were brilliant, twinkling against the dark canvas of the sky. Anna rested her head on Ethan's shoulder, her hand entwined with his. "Do you think we'll ever truly move past what happened?" she asked quietly. Ethan paused, considering her question. "I think what happened will always be a part of us," he said. "But it doesn't have to define us. What matters is how we move forward." Anna nodded, her gaze drifting to the stars. "I'm ready," she said softly. "So am I," Ethan replied, his voice steady. As the night deepened, the Carter household grew quiet. In the nursery, their son slept peacefully, his tiny hand clutching the edge of his blanket. In their bedroom, Anna and Ethan lay side by side, their breathing synchronized as they drifted towards sleep. The camera pans to the small metal box in Ethan's office, its secrets locked away but never forgotten. The final shot lingers on a photo of the Carter family, a snapshot of love, resilience, and the unbreakable bond they shared. The screen fades to black as a message appears. Injustice thrives in silence. Strength thrives in love. This story wasn't just about a terrible injustice. It was about resilience, love, and the extraordinary lengths we go to protect those we cherish. Anna's courage in the face of pain and fear inspired a community to stand up against wrongdoing, reminding us all that even in the darkest moments, hope can shine through. Ethan's quiet determination showed the strength of family bonds and the power of justice when paired with unwavering resolve. What happened to Anna was a tragedy, but it also became a turning point, not just for her family, but for the entire town of Havenwood. It's a reminder that change starts with one voice, one action, and one refusal to stay silent. Together, those small acts ripple outward, creating waves of accountability and progress. This story leaves us with a powerful lesson. While we cannot always control the actions of others, we can control how we respond. And when we choose love, justice, and unity, we build a foundation where brighter futures are possible for everyone. Bookmark. If you found this story moving, we'd love to hear from you. If you think it was good, comment with a 1. If you think it was amazing, comment with a 2. And don't stop there. Share your own stories with us. Your voice matters, and we'd love to connect with your experiences. Make sure to subscribe to our channel so you never miss another inspiring story like this one. Let us know your thoughts about Anna and Ethan's journey in the comments below. Let's keep the conversation alive and continue building a world where courage and love lead the way.